afternoon. Welcome back. I'm Jim from SoberNow.com, and today I'm going to be talking about the weight of carrying resentment. Welcome all of your questions, insights, experiences. Please post them. We're streaming live today on SoberNow's Facebook page, ChooseHelp.com's Facebook page. Lots of different ways to connect with us. The easiest one is SoberNow.com, where for the time being we have the opportunity to gain lifetime access to the program for a low purchase price with complete anonymity and complete confidentiality. So always a pleasure to talk with you, and would love to hear your questions, your insights. I try very hard to pay attention to the ways in which my higher power is trying to get my attention. And talking about resentments is something that I do very often as an addictions counselor, as a trauma therapist. What I've learned is something I could talk about for days on end, but what I want to focus on today is the intersection between resentment and the experience of trauma. And so this is something that I get to talk about quite frequently, but I also notice it in myself. So for me, one of the biggest red flags that goes off for me every so often is when I find myself experiencing a lot of righteous anger. I think about the big book of AA, the references that anger is a luxury that we can ill afford. So anger is certainly a normal, healthy emotion. But when I have righteous anger, it's usually about something that I'm powerless over. It's usually about something that is not about me, and I'm very good at righteous anger. It's like a drug for me. I can get up on my soapbox and tell these people that they're wrong for how they're treating those people, but I've never done that and felt real good about it. So what I've learned about righteous anger is that it is most often a distraction for personal anger. And there's a good chance that I need to take stock and look at what is it that I'm not dealing with, what is it that's really happening below the surface, and what do I need to do about that. I'm very, very fond of the expression that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison and hoping the person you're mad at dies. I think in the simplest of terms, resentment is past pain and past anger. But we'll get into this a little bit later. For a lot of us, resentment is actually a product of rage, of past or present abuse, and so there's a lot to explore there. What I've learned from working with people in recovery for a lot of years is it's very common that themes and experiences, memories about trauma start to surface, particularly as we start doing steps 4 and 5. We start taking that moral inventory, and it's just very natural that as we explore our part in things of past pain and anger, things that we're still holding on to, for most of us, childhood abuse and trauma is part of that. So when I'm talking with folks who are starting step 4, I always encourage them to seek additional support. This is kind of like we're going to open up the closet and bring out some skeletons, and that can be overwhelming. It can be scary. I think it's something that should be done very, very slowly. And I also encourage folks, if they have, even if they're not affiliated with 12-step programs, I encourage them to pick up a copy of AA's 12 Steps and 12 Traditions, and I want them to just read Step 10. I know that the steps are in order for a reason. What I appreciate about Step 10 is that it talks about essentially how not to build new resentments in our day-to-day life going forward. So if we're working through old resentments but commonly building new ones, then to me that just means we're always going to have old ones to go back for. So Step 10 references the emotional hangover, the excesses that a lot of us engage in, and the tendency to avoid conflict, the tendency to repress emotion. A lot of these things we conceptualize them as character defects, but in truth, for an awful lot of us, they are trauma responses. And so I think those are important to examine. I think for a lot of us, we get hung up as we go through step 4 looking for our part in things. And there are, particularly when it comes to trauma, there are many, many things that can surface that clearly we have no part in. A child who experiences any form of abuse or neglect, by definition, does not have a part to play in that. A person who experiences being sexually assaulted does not have a part to play in that. It is certainly the case that we need to look at what was our role, what were the behaviors or attitudes that maybe put us in harm's way or made us more susceptible to being harmed. But that doesn't apply to things like rape or sexual assault, and it certainly doesn't apply to the experiences of children. So my experience is that very often what we define as defects of character are actually just unhealthy forms of coping. Ways in which we're avoidant, ways in which we're self-destructive, our tendency to become enmeshed in the lives of others, or conversely, the ways in which we tend to isolate. Engaging in active addiction or trading addictions. We find so many ways to distract ourselves from ourselves. And the whole idea is to continue to not remember, try to block out certain thoughts, try to not experience certain emotions. We're numbing ourselves, and on top of all of the other problems that creates, it ensures that we continue to carry our past with us. If you're not familiar with it, head over to YouTube and check out Linkin Park's song Heavy. Truly great song, but it speaks to the experience that a lot of us have in trying to resolve mental health problems and trying to be free of addiction. And the lyric that hits me every time is, "If I just let go, I'd be set free." I think for most of us, freedom is scary, but as my friends in 12-step programs say, ideally you get to a point where the fear of change becomes outweighed by the fear of staying the same. So when we talk about letting go, I think too often that's a trite expression. It's something that most of us don't know how to do, and it's actually the exact opposite of what most of us were conditioned to do as children. Letting go starts with mindfulness, and I always joke about this. Mindfulness is a nice word that counselors use for, hey, you need to pay attention to you. And if you are paying attention to you, then you're going to notice a couple of really important things. You're going to notice your self-talk, you're going to notice how you relate to yourself, and you're going to notice what it is that you're feeling, what kind of things are surfacing for you. And those need to be identified and sorted out. They need to be shared. But the key to that is actually withholding judgment of the emotions that surface, because we're really good at talking ourselves out of simply feeling what we feel. We tell ourselves that it's a waste of energy to be angry, or that we shouldn't be angry. We tell ourselves that we should have gotten over this long before now. And none of those approaches work. They're barriers to acceptance. And what I know is that until I accept something for being what it is, not forever, but at least in this moment, I can't change it. As long as I'm saying I shouldn't be this way, I'm not going to take any steps towards becoming healthier. So if I withhold judgment, then I can express it bit by bit. I need to share it. I need to journal it. I need to put it in writing. I can certainly include it in step work. I can share it with friends, coaches, family, therapists, people that support my ongoing recovery. And then I can release it bit by bit. And I think this is one of the things that's hardest for us, is we want letting go to be a one-time event. We want to simply plow through like bulls in a china shop and be done with it. And it simply doesn't work that way. If you're able to express 5 minutes of pain, if you're able to allow yourself to grieve or to cry, then every bit that you've expressed becomes an opportunity to lighten your load, to have less baggage to carry. But that has to be a conscious decision. I have to be willing to let go of what I've brought out, because if I don't, otherwise, without any conscious awareness, I'll reel that back in, metaphorically. When I've carried something for a long time, there's a part of me that feels like it's supposed to be there, And the idea of not continuing to carry it is scary for us. There's a lot of irrational fears that we have around letting go, and they're actually very, very common. It's just that people tend not to talk about them very much. So I would love to have $1 for every time a client has said to me, I don't know who I'll be if I don't have all this anger. I don't know who I'll be if I don't continue to carry all this pain. And I usually tease them and say, well, you'll be the same jerk, but with a lot less pain and anger. So it creates opportunities for us to become healthier versions of ourselves. It creates a newfound freedom that allows us to be more of who we want to be and less of what we feel we need to compensate for, or less of trying to make sure that we're not becoming the people that we don't want to be. I'm seeing a lot of references in media, social media lately, to becoming the best version of yourself. So I can tell you that, at least for me, the best version of myself emerged over and over again as I was willing to let go of pain and as I expressed it. And it's hard. Letting go of pain hurts, and anybody who tells you otherwise is trying to sell you something that doesn't work. I don't know how to let go of anger without feeling and expressing anger. I know that for a lot of us, we have this idea that we can just get over it. I don't know how to get over anything. I know what that expression means. I know what the intention is. The intention of telling somebody to get over it is to essentially say, well, just ignore it. Just pretend that it doesn't bother you. Just try to block that out of your mind. And going through it means that I can achieve some resolution. I can work through the conflicts that I have with myself. I can let go of past pain and anger. I can express myself, develop a greater understanding of myself, and allow others to support me and believe in me, allow them to bear witness to my struggles, and to be able to, I think of it as the difference between suffering and grieving. Suffering I do alone and I recycle past pain. Grieving is sharing pain with good people and having a willingness to let go of it. And it's hard. One more reason to be patient with yourself. I think for a lot of us, it's one of the biggest struggles about letting go of past resentment are some unhealthy ideas or some misguided ideas that we have about forgiveness. So I think that most of us conceptualize forgiveness as something really kind that we do for the person that hurt us, and I don't see it that way. To me, forgiveness can be something that I do only for myself. I don't even have to involve the people that hurt me. I don't even need to tell them. In fact, a very high percentage of the folks that I had to forgive, I've never had that conversation with, because to allow them access to my life or to be vulnerable, to allow myself to be vulnerable with them about my emotional experience simply isn't safe. So forgiveness, to me, is an emotional process and a spiritual process. I'm asking my higher power to take something away, but that requires that I be willing to release it. I need to approach it the same way I would if I was seeking forgiveness from someone else. If I was looking to be forgiven, I would first and foremost take accountability for my actions. I would ask for forgiveness, but I would also be very open to hearing how my actions or my choices affected that person. I would want to talk it out as far as, did we have any misunderstandings or misconceptions? And then, of course, the best apology involves changed behavior. If I'm just sorry and sorry and sorry over and over again, nothing really changes, and it's not truly being sorry. So I think that's a pretty simple way to approach it with any other person. And then what I notice is that when we come to approaching ourselves, somehow we feel like we have to learn a whole new skill set. And I just don't see it that way. If you know how to do something for someone else, then you know how to do it for you. It works exactly the same way. Getting on the same page with yourself, identifying internal conflicts and identifying past pain that you carry really is, well, it's an inside job that's best done by involving others. I think for a lot of us, we're stuck in the idea that if I forgive them, then it's like saying that what they did was okay, and that certainly is not true. I don't know what we might care to define as unforgivable. I think for myself, I certainly was not saying that what they did to me was okay. What I was saying was I'm not willing to continue carrying this. I'm not willing to continue being limited by this. I'm not willing to, this was the biggest one. When I withhold forgiveness, sometimes I find that what I'm really doing is treating myself the way that the people who hurt me the most did. And that was a pretty huge piece for me. It made a lot of things possible because I could say, well, I will be damned if I'm going to treat myself the way that they did. I'm not going to honor my abusers. So forgiveness was a way for me to reconcile that and fundamentally change the ways in which I related to myself. I went from being my own worst enemy to being somebody who could be fair and respectful to self. Eventually it became, I became somebody that I actually really like. I think self-love is, to me, it's an ideal that we always strive towards. I don't know if we ever get 100% there. So I'm going to just treat it as a work in progress. Okay, gonna pause real quick and just see what we have for questions or comments. Folks are quiet today, it appears. That's okay. A few more thoughts to share. It's always funny to me when I talk with people about past trauma and the resentment that they carry. They always reference their age, and so they'll say things to me like, I'm 65 years old, when am I going to get past this? And I'll say, well, when you walk through it and when you do the work around releasing it. It's I think the older we get, the harder it gets as far as our expectations of self and where it is that we're supposed to be, and I don't think that's real. I think where I am is largely a product of the work that I've done and the guidance that I've accepted from people who know more than I do, from my higher power, and from the lessons that are placed in my path. I've noticed that a lot of us tend to withhold forgiveness from ourselves. I think actually in a lot of cases the hardest person for me to forgive was myself. I think that's true for a lot of folks. I think on some level we're afraid that if we forgive that we might repeat the behavior, and so quite often we hold resentment against self as this kind of form of self-control. I think shame is an enormous barrier to forgiveness of self, and I understand that. It saddens me when I see people who carry it. I always point out to folks the difference between guilt and shame. Guilt is I did bad, and shame is I am bad. And I've met a lot of people who believed they were bad, and it wasn't true of any of them. Sadly, when we explore how trauma is very often connected to our resentments, I very often actually talk with people who survived sexual abuse as children and reenacted that behavior as children and come to the wrong conclusion that they must be monsters, that there must be something fundamentally wrong with them. And that is absolutely not the case. I know a lot about monsters, and what I know is that they don't regret, and they don't seek to change their ways, and they don't work through past trauma to become a better and healthier version of themselves. That's not what monsters do. People who want to ensure that they are good and loving and kind to others are certainly not monsters. But a lot of us get stuck in the shame of having survived, particularly sexual abuse, and a lot of us see this as somehow something that defines us, and I completely disagree. As horrible as those experiences are, it's kind of like the same view that we have about what a person does during active addiction. that doesn't define a person. That is not who they are. So better that we judge by who someone is trying to be today than what they did in their past. And again, sadly, for most of us, the biggest cause of our shame are not anything that we did, but rather things that were done to us. So those things do not define you. I notice that we have a propensity to labeling ourselves, and that saddens me as well. So to me, surviving past abuse, surviving past trauma, the only label I want to put on a person for that is being a survivor. And survivors are amazing people. They're the very best people in my experience. People who are in recovery from addiction, in recovery from mental illness, in recovery from eating disorders, self-harm, all of the destructive things that people like me do to ourselves. The very best people in the world. The most loving, kind, understanding, compassionate, empathic people. And we need each other. And one of the biggest reasons that we need each other is because our sense of self tends to be very warped, and it is not at all consistent with how good people experience us. But the cost of carrying shame is that too often we project onto others how they should think about us. We deflect praise, recognition, all the good stuff, and say to ourselves, well, if they only knew. If they only knew how bad I was, they wouldn't see me that way. So I remind folks that they probably haven't invented some new sin that the rest of us haven't committed, and that if we all knew 100% of the truth about everybody's past, then that would probably change the way we see things as well. So again, we don't have to judge ourselves that way, we don't judge others that way, and ideally we'll come to a place where we judge ourselves as fairly or as kindly as we judge others. I know that very often resentment is more than pain, it is more than anger, it is quite often rage. Rage is, to me, experiencing several different emotions simultaneously, each of which is overwhelming. So the difference between anger and rage is a convoluted mix of pain, anger, sadness, grief, disappointment, loss, but it also tends to include the feeling of violation, the feeling of betrayal. And so this is overwhelming to us, and so we tend to, most of us try to repress it constantly, which is toxic. It goes along with the idea that holding on to resentment is like drinking poison. Anything we hold on to that's toxic, of course, destroys us from within. And it can be really messy and really hard to release those mixed emotions. I think most of us fear losing control. We fear that we might lash out and hurt others. A lot of us tend to be implosive instead of explosive. And we justify it by the idea that as long as I'm the only one that gets hurt, then it's okay. And that is absolutely not okay. It's not okay for anyone to hurt me, and it's a responsibility for me not to hurt me. So having healthy outlets, being able to confide in folks who understand, whether that's a therapist or a sponsor or a kindred spirit that we know has a strong ability to relate to us, those are vital to our process. Being able to let go of some of those deepest wounds and to slowly heal them has the chance to revolutionize a person's life, and that's what I want for everybody. Freedom is scary. Adjusting to life as we heal past trauma and as we let go of resentment, it's a big deal. It's not what we're used to, and it is a constant series of adjustments. Okay. Looking at the comments, just talked about this with an AA friend, synchronicity. Thank you. I love synchronicity. I'm not a believer in coincidences, and I absolutely love it whenever I'm hearing the same thing from different folks in a short period of time. That's almost always my higher power trying to get my attention and asking me to simply notice something and to move towards it. So I think there's a ton of opportunities in this. I always encourage folks, whether they're in a 12-step fellowship or whether they're just going through some form of trauma recovery, the idea is to take stock and to do so very simply. What still hurts? What am I still conflicted with myself about? Where am I on the fence? What kind of things am I still ambivalent about? And what investments do I need to make? So I hope that you have lots of outside input with that. I hope that you have a willingness to heal and to grow. And I remind you that being fearful of that is not only common, it's 100% of us are. And so you're supposed to be afraid. It's supposed to be a hard thing. And the truth is, most of us, when we really get into this work, it's because we believe that we must. But the opportunities in all of this are tremendous, and I think we would want this for anybody that we care about. And so I want to say to you that you deserve these things as well. You absolutely do. If you have folks in your life that are supportive of your recovery process, that's awesome. Maybe share the video with them and talk with them about what it is that you need. If you have ideas or questions, or you're struggling with this process, or maybe you don't have folks to reach out to, connect with me. Jim at sobernow.com is the quickest and easiest way to get in touch. Check out our Facebook page, Sober Now. Give that a like. We have a growing library of videos on YouTube. The Sober Now channel now has over 80 videos on topics that relate directly to all forms of recovery, and would love to have you share those. Hit the subscribe button so you can get notified when typically one a week or sometimes two is what comes out every week. Would love to have you check out our website, sobernow.com. Currently, we're going to be moving to a subscription process in the near future, but at the moment, a $99 investment would get you lifetime access to all of the programs and all of the updates that are forthcoming. There's currently 2 28-day home study programs there, one for folks who are seeking addiction recovery, and one for folks who are affected others, those of us who have a loved one in active addiction or early recovery. So those are just a few of the resources available to you. Please share the video. We'd love to expand this conversation. We'd love to hear from you what topics you'd like to see covered in future videos, what questions you have, and let us know what's going on in your recovery so that we can be an active support to you. Look forward to talking to you next time. Please take especially good care of yourself. These are obviously trying times, and so your self-care is more important than it's ever been. All right, take care. God bless.